Chapter 2: The Nature and Function of Language. The function of language. The function of language is threefold: to communicate thought, volition, and emotion. Man, like other animals, may communicate emotions such as fright, anger, or satisfaction by means of cries or exclamations, which in human language are called interjections. Dumb animals use different kinds of cries to express different emotions. Dogs bark in one way when they are angry and in another way when they are pleased. So also the mews of cats and the neighs of horses vary in order to express various feelings. Although they may be repeated, animal cries can never be united to form a sentence. They are always mere interjections, and interjections, even in human speech, cannot be assimilated into the structure of a sentence. Human beings, however, are not limited, as other animals are, to express their feelings by interjections. They may use sentences. Volition, in brackets desires, or appetition, in brackets appetites, may be expressed by cries or exclamations, as when a baby cries or a dog barks for food. Since, however, desires multiply as knowledge increases, humans usually express their desires, choices, and commands in sentences. Only humans can utter sounds which unite in a sentence to express thought, because humans alone, among animals, have the power to think. Consequently, they alone have language in the proper sense of the word. This follows from their nature, for they are rational and therefore have something to say, social and therefore have someone to say it to, and animal, therefore require a physical mode of communicating ideas from one mind, which is isolated from all others in the body, to another mind likewise isolated. Pure spirits, such as angels, communicate thought, but their communication is not properly called language because it does not employ a physical medium. Means of communication. There are possible only two modes of communicating ideas through a physical or material medium, by imitation or by symbol. Imitation. An imitation is an artificial likeness, for example, a painting, photograph, cartoon, statue, pantomime, a gesture such as threatening with a clenched fist or rejecting by pushing away with the hands, and picture writing. There is no mistaking the meanings of a picture, it means what it resembles. The picture of a horse or a tree cannot represent a man or a dog. Even though imitation is a clear means of communication, it is limited, difficult, slow, and unable to express the essences of things. Imagine picture writing your next letter to a friend. Within limits, however, imitation is a vivid and effective mode of communication. Symbol. A symbol is an arbitrary sensible sign having a meaning imposed on it by convention. A sign is sensible, for it can be perceived by the senses. Every sign has meaning either from nature or from convention. A cloud, which is a sign of rain, and smoke, which is a sign of fire, have meaning from nature. A green light, which is a sign that traffic should move, has meaning from convention. Symbols. Meaning from nature or convention. By convention or arbitrary agreement, symbols are devised that are either temporary or permanent. Illustration. Symbols. Temporary symbols. Signals adopted by a football team. Password necessary to get through military lines. School or team colors. Permanent symbols. Traffic lights. Flags. A soldier's salute. A nod of affirmation. Heraldry. Hieroglyphics. Chemical formulas. Numbers. Onomatopoeic words. All words are symbols with the exception of a few imitative or onomatopoeic words such as boom, buzz, hiss, plop, tick-tock. We are likely to undervalue our precious heritage of symbols and to underestimate their convenience. Some symbols are less convenient than others for the same purpose. For example, Roman numerals are less convenient for computation than Arabic numerals. Illustration. Computation with Roman numerals. In a work by Alcuin, CCXXV is multiplied by IV in this manner. CC times IV equals DCCC, XXX times IV equals CXX, V times IV equals XX. Roman numerals were used in all computations necessary in carrying on the business of the vast Roman Empire. Symbols, special or common. Special symbols are designed by experts to express with precision ideas in a special field of knowledge, for example, mathematics, chemistry, music. Such special languages are international and do not require translation, for their symbols are understood by people of all nationalities in their own language. The multiplication table is a set of symbols understood by a French person in French, a German in German, etc. The same is true of chemical formulas and equations and of musical notation. Common symbols or words, such as French, German, Chinese, or Greek words, constitute the common languages. A common language is one invented by the common people to meet all their needs in communication in the course of life. Accordingly, it is a more adequate mode of communication than the special languages, although it is less precise and more ambiguous in the sense that one word may have either of two or more meanings. The common languages are not understood internationally, but require translation. Two attempts to provide an international language may be mentioned. Esperanto is an artificial amalgam based on words common to the chief European languages. Basic English is a careful selection of 850 English words which, through paraphrase, are designed to do duty for a wider vocabulary. A common language may be native or foreign according to place, or living or dead according to usage. Every dead language, such as Latin, was at one time a living common language. It may be serviceable for special uses, such as liturgy or doctrine, from the very fact that it is a dead language and, therefore, not subject to changes or to a variety of interpretations as living languages. A dead language is more likely to be understood in exactly the same way in all times and all places. According to the mode of expression, a common language may be a system of either spoken symbols or of other signs. The spoken language is the original and fundamental system of symbols for which all other signs are merely substituted. The written language is the most important substitute and the only one ordinarily understood. Among other substitute signs are Braille, sign language, the semaphore code. Each of these substitutes merely renders into its own system of signs words of a common language. The nature of language. It's the nature of language to communicate through symbols. Language is a system of symbols for expressing our thoughts, volitions, and emotions. A word, like every other physical reality, is constituted of matter and form. A word is a symbol. Its matter is the sensible sign, its form is the meaning imposed upon it by convention. Matter and form are metaphysical concepts necessary to the philosophical understanding of any material whole, for together they constitute every such whole. Matter is designed as the first intrinsic and purely potential principle of a corporeal essence. As such, it cannot actually exist without form, for it is not a body but a principle of a body, intrinsically constituting it. Form is the first intrinsic and actual principle of a corporeal essence. Illustration: matter and form. In animals, the body is the matter and the soul is the form. In water, the matter consists of hydrogen and oxygen. The form is the precise mode of their union in a molecule of water. It may be expressed by the chemical formula H2O. The matter of words in spoken language is the sound. This aspect of language is treated in phonetics. The matter of words in written language is the mark or notation. It is treated in orthography or spelling. The form of words is their meaning and is treated in semantics. Language: a system of symbols for expressing our thoughts, volitions, and emotions. Matter of words: spoken language, sound. Science: phonetics, study of sound. Matter of words: written language, mark. Science: orthography, study of spelling. Form of words, meaning, science, semantics, study of meaning. Matter of language. Voice is the sound uttered by an animal. The voice of irrational animals has meaning from nature, from the tone of the utterance. The human voice alone is symbolic, having a meaning imposed upon it by convention. Human beings have articulate voice, by which they add to their simple voice modifications that are produced by the organs of speech: tongue, palate, teeth, lips. The capacity of the articulate voice to produce such modifications in almost limitless variety makes possible the many symbols needed to communicate the wider range of human thought. The alphabet of the International Phonetic Association is a system of written symbols aiming at an accurate and uniform representation of the sounds of speech. It distinguishes 20 vowel sounds, 6 diphthongs, and 27 consonant sounds. The English language lacks 3 of the vowel sounds, those present in German, grün and schön, and in the French, seul, and 2 of the consonant sounds, those present in the German ich and Scottish loch. Form of language. The form of language is meaning. Words can symbolize both individual and essences. In metaphysics or ontology, the science of being, one can distinguish the individual and the essence. The individual is any physical being that exists. Only the individual exists in the sense that every material being that exists or has existed is an individual by itself and not another, and is, therefore, in its individuality unique. Every man, woman, tree, stone, or grain of sand is an individual. Bucephalus, the horse, which belonged to Alexander the Great, was an individual horse. Essence is that which makes a being what it is, and without which it would not be the kind of being it is. Essence is that in an individual which makes it like others in its class, whereas its individuality is that which makes it different from others in its class. Inasmuch as every individual belongs to a class, which in turn belongs to a wider class, we distinguish these classes as species and genus. A species is a class made up of individuals that have in common the same specific essence or nature. Illustration: species and class. Man is the species or class to which William Shakespeare, Albert Einstein, Jane Austen, Queen Victoria, and every other man and woman belong, because the essence or nature of man is common to all of them. Horse is the species or class to which Bucephalus and every other horse belong, because the essence or nature of horse is common to all horses. A genus is a wider class made up of 2 or more different species that have in common the same generic essence or nature. Illustration: genus. Animal is the genus or class to which man, rabbit, horse, oyster, and every other species of animal belong, because the essence or nature of animal is the same in all of them. Flower is the genus to which rose, violet, tulip, and every other species of flower belong, because the essence or nature of flower is the same in all of them. An individual animal or flower belongs to a genus only by being a member of a species within that genus. The abstract character of genus is such that one cannot draw a picture, for example, of animal, but only of a particular kind or species of animal, such as a horse or dog. Yet every species is abstract, for one cannot photograph the species horse or dog, one can photograph only an individual horse or dog, since every horse or dog that exists is an individual. In every individual it is the specific essence or class nature which it has in common with every other member of its species, and also the generic essence or class nature which it has in common with every member of the genus to which its species belongs. The generic essence is merely the specific essence with the more definite characteristics of the latter omitted. In addition to the essence, which makes it like other members of its species and its genus, The individual has individuating characteristics which make it different from every other individual in its species or its genus. An aggregate or group of individuals must be clearly distinguished from a species or a genus. An aggregate is merely a particular group of individuals, such as the trees in Central Park, the inhabitants of California, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the items on a desk, the furniture in a house. A species or a genus always signifies a class nature or essence and includes all the individuals of every place and time having that nature or essence. For example, man is a species and includes all men and women of every place and time, past, present, and future. Tree is a genus and includes every tree. On the other hand, an aggregate is a particular group of individuals that may or may not have the same essence or class nature, but in either case, the aggregate does not include all the members that have that nature. Illustration: aggregate. The women of the 19th century constitute an aggregate of individuals belonging to the same species, but they are only a part of the species, namely, those who existed at a particular time. The things in a room constitute an aggregate of individuals belonging to different species, such as a chair, desk, table, book, heat vent, window, etc., but they are only a small part of each species. An individual is one. An aggregate is simply a group consisting of two or more individuals. Essence is what makes a being what it is. Species is a class made up of individuals that have in common the same specific essence. Genus is a wider class made up of two or more different species. Aggregate is a group consisting of two or more individuals. Language and its symbols. Language employs four important kinds of symbols to represent reality. 2 to symbolize the individuals, 2 to symbolize the essence, which is common to all the individual members of a class. Language can symbolize an individual or an aggregate by either a proper name or a particular or empirical description. A particular or empirical description is a common name to which is joined the definite, which limits its application to a particular individual or group. Empirical means founded on experience. Language can symbolize an individual or an aggregate by either a proper name or a particular or empirical description. A particular or empirical description to which is joined a definitive, which limits its application to a particular individual or group. Empirical means founded on experience. Since only individuals exist, our experience is directly concerned with them. Throughout this book, the word empirical is used with reference to our knowledge of individuals as such. Illustration: language used to symbolize empirical information. A proper name such as Eleanor Roosevelt, the Mississippi River, Halloween, London, the United States Senate, the Rotarians, the Mediterranean Sea can symbolize the individual or an aggregate. A particular or empirical description, such as the present store manager, this computer, the woman who made the flag, the furniture in this house, the microbe now dividing in the petri dish, can symbolize the individual or an aggregate. If language could not symbolize the individual, one could not designate particular persons, places, or times. This would be extremely inconvenient. For example, people could not direct emergency vehicles to their houses. On the other hand, if language could symbolize only the individual, people would be in a worse plight. Every word would be a proper name, and it would therefore be necessary to give a different proper name to every object spoken of, not only to people and places, but to everything, to every tree, blade of grass, chair, fork, potato, coat, shoe, pencil, etc. No one would understand except those who share through simultaneous sense experience acquaintance with the identical individual objects described. Hence, the language of every town, every home, would be different and would be unintelligible to outsiders. The reader may have had a similar experience when 3 or 4 friends were reminiscing about an earlier time not known to the reader. The outsider would take little or no interest in the conversation because even though the words could be understood, the proper names of the absentees, sprinkled plentifully through the conversation, would have no meaning. But if every word were a proper name, unless the listener had personal experience of the very objects being spoken of, he would be not only bored, but completely baffled by the conversation. Words, being all proper names, would become meaningless at the time of destruction of the objects they symbolized. They could not even be explained the way proper names are now explained by means of common names. Open brackets, for example, William Caxton, 1422 to 1491, first English printer, translator, close brackets. For there would be no common names. Therefore, there could be no history, no literature. What authors wrote would be as dead as their voices in their graves. General or universal ideas could not be expressed in language. Therefore, there could not be books on science or philosophy. Language can symbolize essence by either of two kinds of symbols, both of which are applicable to all members of a class. A common name, such as a child, tree, chair, square, hour, can symbolize essence. Most of the words listed in the dictionary are common names. Obviously, then, the bulk of language is made up of common names. They symbolize either species or genus. For example, jump names a species of movement, whereas move means the genus of jump, fly, creep, walk. A general or universal description, such as a rational animal, an equilateral triangle, an organ of sight, can symbolize essence. The definitions given in the dictionary are general descriptions of the single word entries. They clarify the meanings of the common names. A general description is itself made up wholly of common names. Words that represent no reality are not symbols. They are only empty words devoid of meaning. A proper name or an empirical description must symbolize an individual or an aggregate existing in fact, in brackets, past or present, or in fiction, in brackets, wherein are characters, places, etc. created by the imagination, close brackets. Otherwise, it is devoid of meaning, as are the present King of France or the Emperor of Iowa. The following, however, are truly symbols: Hamlet, Sidney Carton, Rapunzel, Nathan Hale, Queen Elizabeth I. So also are all the symbols given above as examples of an individual or an aggregate. A common name or a general description must represent an essence or class nature which is intrinsically possible, although it need not actually exist. Otherwise, it is devoid of meaning, as are a square circle or a triangular square. The following, however, are truly symbols because they express something conceivable: a mermaid, a purple cow, an inhabitant of another planet, a regular polygon with 100 sides, an elephant, a rose. So also are the symbols given above as examples of the essence or class nature of either a species or a genus. Language that symbolizes an individual or aggregate. Proper name, particular or empirical description. Language that symbolizes essence, common name, general or universal description. Creating symbols from reality. Words are symbols of ideas about reality. How does one derive ideas from reality, and how does one classify them? Generating a universal idea or concept involves several steps, a process more fully treated in the study of psychology. Generation of a concept. First, the external senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, operate on an object present before us and produce a percept. The internal senses, primarily the imagination, produce a phantasm or mental image of the individual object perceived, and this phantasm is retained and can be reproduced at will in the absence of the object. Illustration: percept and phantasm. A percept is like a portrait being painted by the artist while she looks at the model. A phantasm is like that same portrait, possessed and looked at whenever one wishes, for years afterward, although the person painted is absent or even dead. There are 4 internal senses: the imagination, the sensus memory, the common or central or synthesizing sense, and instinct. The intellect, through abstraction, produces the concept. The imagination is the meeting ground between the senses and the intellect. From the phantasms in the imagination, the intellect abstracts that which is common and necessary to all the phantasms of similar objects, for example, trees or chairs. This is the essence, that which makes a tree, or that which makes a chair. The intellectual apprehension of this essence is the general or universal concept of a tree or a chair. A general concept is a universal idea existing only in the mind, but having its foundation outside the mind in the essence which exists in the individual and makes it the kind of thing it is. Therefore, a concept is not arbitrary, although the word is. Truth has an objective norm in the real. Percept: the image created by the external senses upon encountering reality. Phantasm: the mental image created by the internal sense, primarily the imagination. Concept: the abstraction created by the intellect through recognition of the essence. A general concept is universal because it is the knowledge of the essence present equally in every member of the class, regardless of time, place, or individual differences. For example, the concept chair is the knowledge of the essence chair, which must be in every chair at all times and in all places, regardless of size, weight, color, material, and other individual differences. The real object, a tree or a chair, and likewise the corresponding percept and phantasm, is individual, material, limited to a particular place and time. The concept is universal, immaterial, not limited to a particular place and time. Only human beings have the power of intellectual abstraction. Therefore, only human beings can form a general or universal concept. Irrational animals have the external and internal senses, which are sometimes keener than those of humans. But because they lack rational powers, intellect, intellectual memory, and free will, they are incapable of progress or of culture. Despite their remarkable instinct, their productions, intricate though they may be, remain the same through the centuries. For example, beaver dams, bird nests, anthills, beehives. Analogy: intellectual abstraction. Flowers contain honey. Butterflies, ants, bees, mosquitoes, and other insects may light upon the flower, but only bees can abstract the honey, for only bees have the power to do so. As the bee abstracts honey from the flower and ignores everything else in them, so the intellect abstracts from the phantasms of similar objects the essence of that which is common and necessary to them, and ignores everything else, namely the individual differences. There is nothing in the intellect that was not first in the senses except the intellect itself. Human intellectual powers need material to work upon. This comes from nature through the senses. Nature provides the materials, and the human intellect conceives and constructs works of civilization which harness nature and increase its value and its service to the human race. Analogy: raw material for intellect. There is nothing in fine cotton, lace, organdy, or heavy muslin that was not in the raw cotton from which they were made. To produce these, the manufacturer requires raw material obtained from nature by cotton planters. Likewise, the intellect requires for thought the raw material obtained from nature through these senses. Abstract or intellectual knowledge is clearer, although less vivid, than concrete or sense knowledge. For example, circles and squares of various sizes and colors can be perceived by the senses and can, consequently, be perceived by a pony as well as by a man. A pony in a circus act might be trained to respond in various ways to colored discs and squares. Only a human being, however, can derive from these various circles and squares the definition of a circle and of a square. A person can also know by abstraction the properties of these figures, such as the relation of the circumference of a circle to its radius, which he expresses in the abstract formula c equals 2 pi times r. Such abstract knowledge is clearer, although it is less vivid than the sense apprehension of the colored figures which the pony can share with a human being. Thomas Moore, in his defense of the uses of statues and pictures, contrasts them with words as a means of instruction. He points out that words are symbols of phantasms and concepts, as has been explained above. Images are necessary books for the uneducated and good books for the learned too. For all words be but images representing the thing that the writer or speaker conceives in his mind. Just as the figure of the thing framed with imagination and so conceived in the mind is but an image representing the very thing itself that a man thinks of. Is, for example, if I tell you a tale of my good friend, the imagination that I have of him in my mind is not himself, but an image that represents him. And when I name him, his name is neither himself nor yet the figure of him in my imagination, but only an image representing to you the imagination of my friend. If I be too far from you to tell it to you, then it is the writing, not the name itself, but an image representing the name. And yet all these names spoken and all these words written be no natural signs or images, but only made by consent and agreement of men, to betoken and signify such a thing, where images painted, graven, or carved may be so well wrought and so near to the quick and the truth that they shall naturally and much more effectually represent the thing than shall the name either spoken or written. For he that never heard the name of my friend shall, if he ever saw him, be brought in by a rightful remembrance of him by his image. Quote, the confutation of Tyndale's answers. 10 categories of being. Once the human intellect creates symbols from reality, those symbols or words can be manipulated and catalogued to increase our understanding of reality. Aristotle's 10 categories of being classify words in relationship to a knowledge of being. These metaphysical categories have their exact counterpart in the 10 categories, or predicamenta, of logic, which classify our concepts or knowledge of being. Every being exists either in itself or in another. If it exists in itself, it is a substance. If it exists in another, it is an accident. We distinguish 9 categories of accident. These, with substance, constitute the 10 categories of being. 1. Substance is that which exists in itself. For example, man. 2. Quantity is a determination of the matter of substance, giving it parts distinct from parts, for example, tall. 3. Quality is a determination of the nature or form of a substance, for example, dark, handsome, intelligent, athletic, chivalrous. 4. Relation is the reference which a substance or accident bears to another, for example, friend, near. 5. Action is the exercise of the faculties or power of a substance so as to produce an effect in something else or in itself, for example, clicking a camera, standing up, smiling. 6. Passion is the reception by a substance of an effect produced by some agent, for example, being invited to return, being drafted. 7. When is position in relation to the course of extrinsic events, which measure the duration of a substance, for example, Sunday afternoon. 8. Where is position in relation to bodies which surround a substance and measure and determine its place, for example, on a bench beside the lake. 9. Posture is the relative position which the parts of a substance have towards each other, for example, sitting, leaning forward. 10. Habiliment consists of clothing ornaments, or weapons with which human beings by their art complement their nature in order to conserve their own being and that of the community. In brackets, the other self. For example, in grey tweeds.